days it's been for us. Thank you for making it such a wonderful event. We've had amazing sessions, amazing feedback from all of you, from those watching the live stream. We're hoping that this final day will be even more exciting, not only because the World Cup starts today, but because we have an amazing keynote speaker coming up for you. This morning's keynote session will be Infor, a CRM company who's been transforming the industry. Please join me in welcoming Charles Phillips, the CEO of Infor, to the stage.
Well, good morning, everyone, and good to see everybody in the audience. I think this is a great opportunity to obviously talk about a topic we all care about, and that's a journey to the cloud. And so what we're going to talk about this morning is probably a little bit differently, is how we use cloud to really transform a company and change a strategy. And this was a unique opportunity of a company that wanted to transform, wanted to change, brought in a new management team, and so we had a blank sheet of paper. So we decided to use cloud as a roadmap to really change our position in the industry and hopefully along the way change the industry a bit. So let me tell you what we did, talk about our journey a bit, the decisions we made, where we're at right now, and hopefully some of that would resonate with you. So first of all, we're headquartered here in New York City, Infor is, so that's why the subway is up there, and right down in Chelsea. So we moved here, the company here, about actually 2 years ago, and I'll talk about why we did that, but that's been an experience in itself, but it was part of our transformation. Snapshot of who we are first. We're about a crossover close to 3 billion now, 70,000 customers. We're in a bunch of countries around the world, over 100 countries. We're the third largest private technology company in the world and the third largest business applications company. So we build applications for select industries, software applications. About 13,000 employees, and right now we have about 12 million people who log into our cloud applications. So what are they logging into? This is the footprint of our product line. We build, the top is a common user experience that we call SOHO. I'll talk about that a little bit later. All of our applications look and behave the same. And then we build some applications by industry. So the things that are in the colored row there are the industries we serve: manufacturing, healthcare, public sector, distribution, hospitality. So the things that are in the colored boxes are actually different in terms of products. And then the things below that are commonly shared by all the applications, the back office applications, so a full suite of financial applications, human resources, thousands of customers who run their HCM, payroll, financials, a common tech stack across all those applications, middleware product we built called ION, and then common infrastructure for workflow analytics and all that. So the things that are different by industry, we build them differently, have separate products. The things that should be the same, we share those across the applications. So we're basically business applications business that we're in. Very large customer base, common logo slide, but we have tons of customers, brands you would recognize by industry, and that's the way we think of them. So that's a key asset here, 70,000 customers that are doing mission critical things within for business applications. But with all that, all those resources and size that we have, we still consider ourselves the world's largest startup. And the reason is because this company has been going through a transformation, brought in a new management team. I brought 3 executives with me from Oracle. We started the same day in December of 2010. Since then, we've brought in about 3,500 new people out of the 3,000. We hired 1,500 new engineers. And the mandate was to change the company, generate growth, focus on innovation. And we had the capital and the mandate to do that. And we were private, so we could do some things you couldn't do when you were public in terms of being aggressive. And so we think like a startup. And we're constantly looking for ways to change the industry. As the third largest business applications company, if you want to become the first, the number one, you have to do something different than the other two. And so we have the motivation to look for different things to do. So let me talk about what some of those are. So we basically have three components to our strategy when we first came here. And this is on a journey on the way to the cloud, but to get there first, we had to do some things. First, to get the applications in a state where we could move to the cloud. So first thing we had to do is we build applications by industry. We call them micro verticals because we build by sub-industry, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But you had to do that to actually have a complete application that's deep enough so you could actually move all critical operations for a company to the cloud so they don't have to customize. So I'll talk about that in a moment. The second thing we did is we had to get the architecture ready for open computing. We call it the architecture of the internet. That's using open source components. That's using standard XML for integration. Model it after the internet so it's easy to integrate and low cost to deploy. And the third thing we had to do was change the user experience, because the idea around using and provisioning a cloud applications, it should also be easy to use. There's no benefit in provisioning something for fast use instantly if you need 6 weeks of training to use it later. And so that's a big part of our differentiation is the user experience, and I'll talk about why we're investing so much in that area. So those are the three things that we're doing. So we took all that and said, now that we've done that and we're in a certain state with our applications, let's take all that. Those are kind of was requirements that we thought to get to the cloud. You have to have a complete footprint, have the micro vertical functionality so people didn't have to customize. All of this was required. Let's move all that into the cloud. So let's talk about kind of why we did that and how. So I mentioned we could use cloud to disrupt. We're the guys that have to do something differently if we want to gain share. So our advantage was we have open infrastructure. We don't sell databases, hardware. We don't sell an application server. We would rather use what's standard and what's open source where possible. So we're the first business applications company of any size to standardize on Postgres, Linux, JBoss, and that makes a lot of sense for us. It's easier for us to move to the cloud. If you don't do that, you end up paying that cost yourself. As a cloud service, those become our cost. And so we had the freedom to do that. Also, from a just business strategy, it's very hard for a company to move to the cloud if they're also selling hardware and databases for on-premise use, because they have a motivation for you to deploy on-premise. You don't get to sell the hardware and the database and all the other infrastructure once the customer decides to go cloud, so that you're naturally conflicted. We don't have any of those conflicts. The other thing we had was a large base of customers who are already on support, paying us maintenance. And they have a motivation to stick with us and evolve over time. And that becomes a huge asset because we can go to those customers and say, now for your next upgrade, it's going to be in the cloud. And instead of paying me maintenance anymore, we're going to turn that into a subscription. And that's actually, the economics work out well for us and for them. We lower their cost of deployment, and we get a more loyal customer, and we can see how they're using the application. Tons of other benefits you already know about the cloud applications. The other thing we have is, as I mentioned, we're private. We can move fast. We can make decisions. If we want to make this transition as fast as possible, we have only 3 owners, Golden Gate Capital in San Francisco, Summit in Boston, and the management team. We can make that decision. So we're moving fast because we want to. We're well capitalized, over $600 million cash, plenty of capital. We've raised over $1 billion since we've been here. And we have a mandate for change. And so we're using this as a call to action, as a way to say we can be more aggressive than anybody else. We have less at risk, and we can have the freedom to make decisions as a startup. So the way we thought about it is our opportunity was to take cloud and make it more comprehensive for how companies actually run. So the first generation of cloud applications were mostly custom apps. So people who didn't want to build their own data centers anymore had their own apps. The commercial vendors were still running on-premise because they wanted to sell the upfront license. It just wasn't a thought for most custom apps, for most commercial apps. But customers who had deployment urgencies and didn't want to build data centers, especially in maybe international markets, it became actually a pretty good thing to do. So, and then after that, you started to have some startups that focused on what we call the edge applications. So HCM, CRM, and those are easier to deploy in the cloud. And in some view, they're a little bit less mission critical. You're not making products, for instance, or in your manufacturing operation. And you can have people who can make a decision away from IT to actually deploy them in some cases. And so that's where companies like Salesforce.com and others focus first, because that was easy to carve off. What's now needs to happen is to take the core mission critical applications for the manufacturing operations of an automobile company, for instance, or the production applications for a food and beverage company. Those are largely still on premise. That's where we come in. So we can do all the edge applications as well. We have a platform to let you build custom app called Mongoose, a development platform if you want to do that. We have HCM, CRM, full suite of applications there. But to really move an entire company to the cloud, you have to do the core as well, the mission critical things. And that's what we do well. So we're taking all of this. We want to become the first company to do comprehensively move a complete company, including the core, to a cloud platform. So let me explain what we mean by vertical functionality core ERP, why that's different from these other areas. So let's look at one of our focus industries like automotive. So within automotive, there's not one automotive industry. There's all these micro verticals, people who do different things within the automotive industry. Now they're related and they're partners and they're suppliers to each other. But if you're an OEM, that's different from building specialty vehicles, and that's different from someone who's a dealer, or who does aftermarket parts supply, or who does rentals. So all these things have different requirements, and we build products at this level for each segment of the automotive industry. So we call those the micro verticals, and there are thousands of them. So if you're in food and beverage, for instance, well, it's not one food and beverage industry. There's meats, there's dairies, there's bakers, and they all have different requirements. All these little tiny features that we call last mile features, that's what we've been building for a long, long time. We have that. We have people that understand those industries. Things that are nuanced, as for a baker, we have applications that measure how fast a stove heats up and cools down at different altitudes so that you can make the bread taste the same everywhere. On and on and on, these little nuances. Most people don't want to do that because by definition, you can't sell it to all customers. It's very focused on a micro vertical. But it's mission critical to that customer, very important to them. And if you have that, you tend to have a great relationship with the customer, and you get the rest of the suite deployed as well because they want it all integrated. So that's what we have, and that's what we're going to take to the cloud, all this mission critical last mile functionality. And so if you look at automotive, just continue along that theme, all these little micro verticals that we've built, we've taken that and integrated that into a suite of applications. All the things that we know an automotive company needs, whether it's supplier exchanges, EDI, asset management, production scheduling, supply chain management, build a beautiful front end, fast provisioning in the cloud, and that's what we offer to an automotive company. And so that initiative to rewrite our applications, integrate them together, put them in the cloud, is now called Infor Cloud Suite. So that's our go-forward product line. It's a cloud suite to take all the experience that we have by industry, to take our thinking on the platform and really rethink it and deploy it in the cloud, and it becomes a service. And so our net new customers today, they take out a subscription to our application as opposed to buying a perpetual license in the old days. And there's lots of reasons for doing that. I'll get into the economics in just a moment. So we took that same theme and said, well, we're an industry-based company. We build deep applications by industry, so we should actually have one for each industry. So now there's a cloud suite automotive, but there's also a cloud suite equipment for equipment dealers. There's a cloud suite healthcare. Healthcare is a big one for us. We are big in the healthcare industry. If you look at the hospitals in the United States, 72% of the hospitals with more than 150 beds run our applications for things like nurse scheduling, patient acuity, financials, HCM, on and on. Surgical instrument management, and so we can automate a hospital. But now they want to do that in the cloud because they're under all sorts of pressure to get their costs down because of Affordable Care Act. And so we're going to keep doing this industry by industry where we have expertise. We'll go deep and build a cloud suite for that industry. And that's been a key part of our strategy going forward. So when you look at that, let's look at kind of what's happened since we started on this journey in the last 3.5 years. So we now have about 2,000 customers globally and growing, about 12 million subscribers who are using those applications on a weekly basis. We've also made sure we're compliant with all the major security standards, so we're HIPAA compliant as well. We'll talk about how we did all that for the healthcare industry. Each industry has some certainly certifications that many of you are probably familiar with. And that's happened over the last 3.5 years. And so the platform is ready. We have the micro-vertical functionality. We have a good partner on how we deploy this. But how do we get there? We had to do a lot of work to the application, so you can't just take what you had before and say it's, it was version 10 before, now version 11, we're just going to move it and run it on the cloud. That actually doesn't work. It's not economical. It's not actually optimizing for the cloud platform. So we spent 3.5 years building a cloud suite architecture. We had to do things like expose state in our applications so we could share that state with Amazon Web Services, because if you share the state when the session ends, you can give those resources back to Amazon and not pay for them. So all those things for patching and provisioning, multi-tenancy, of course. We wanted to make sure there were no source code changes needed to configure our applications. So each application group, we had to go through this long journey, have the certification list, and we had to just kind of step through this. We wanted to move to an open source stack, and I'll talk about more reasons why we did that in just a moment. All the security issues. So all of these, we had this massive internal architecture checklist that each application group just had to, over time, march through to say that you're cloud ready. And that only when you did all those things could you become part of our cloud suite applications going forward. So we've done all the integrations. We adopted that, what we call internet standards-based integration with complete XML. We don't do proprietary middleware for our integrations either. And so this is, I think, going to be a competitive advantage. We've made the investments. A lot of the cloud applications that you've seen where they came from on-premise, they just moved them as is without doing all of this. And so that certainly is going to make it harder to provision quickly, harder to change, harder to manage and patch, and actually have it act like a service as opposed to an outsourced application. So we chose for our platform Amazon Web Services. We were at their conference about 2 months ago. We announced this, that we were consolidating our customers on Amazon. We made the presumption that if you were starting a cloud company today, the first thing you would do would not be to build a data center. That was true 15 years ago when many of the companies started, or 10 years ago. Doesn't make a lot of sense today. The data centers that you can get from third parties are so much better, more secure, and more locations. We're a very global company, over almost in 200 countries and territories, that we needed data centers in multiple places. I don't want to build them all over the world. It wasn't a good use of our capital to be investing it in building data centers anyway, and it's always going to change, get cheaper. So we thought Amazon was a good partner. We evaluated everything out there. We've used some of everything over the years and decided that if we really wanted to be good at this and optimize, we had to pick one and really optimize and build the tooling around it. And given that they have the capacity that's kind of 10 times the next 5 vendors combined, and they had the global footprint, and more importantly, they also acted like a startup. Every time we called them, within hours, we got answers. They changed certain services for us. They did some joint development, so they're a very good partner for us. So we're happy with that. So we're going to continue down that path. So what we did was, again, we had to change our applications. Amazon has some 400 services that you can take advantage of within the context of their cloud platform. So we actually took our tooling and started to accommodate and integrate those services into our applications for doing things like auto scaling, as I mentioned before, automatic failover. And so we built those services out and taken advantage of them. It was by far the most mature platform that we could find out there when we started looking at that. No one's even close. And so that's why we had to pick one. If you really want to take advantage of those services and not just kind of stay generic, then you can't do that for 10 platforms. And we're happy with how that turned out. So what do the numbers look like now that we've done that? So if you look at our TCO comparison using the OpenStack, it's not even close. So by going to an OpenStack platform on Amazon using Postgres, JBoss, et cetera, it's about, about 16 to 20% of the cost of what it would have been otherwise. And so this is a compelling reason to consider open source. And the other thing we like about going open source for the infrastructure is it's what our customers are doing. So we polled our customers. A lot of them were already using Postgres and JBoss and Linux. That's how they build their custom applications. So they were very comfortable with this. And it's easy to support this, and we actually can support it ourselves. We're working with Enterprise DB. For those of you who don't know them, they are what Red Hat is to Red Hat Linux. Enterprise DB is to Postgres. They help support it. In fact, they spun out of Red Hat. And if you look at the performance, we didn't give anything up on performance. We work with Enterprise DB to tune their database on Postgres. And we've seen the performance improvements happen over the last 6 months. Have been very responsive, and so it's pretty much very consistent with the same performance we get on the major proprietary databases now after we've done the tuning, and there's more tuning to go. So what do the savings look like? If you look at on-premise versus cloud, we spend a lot of time helping customers kind of work through this and look at their own costs, and we found a lot that often customers don't all the way know their own cost because they're in different budgets. They'll look at the cost of the software maintenance, but what about the hardware? What about the maintenance on the hardware? What about the database? What about the middleware? The infrastructure, the real estate, the rental for that, the space, the electricity and the power, all of that. So we have a service where we go in and help people understand that. Our value engineering group will go in and find where the money is, what budgets it lies in, and then add all that up. And on average, you can see there's easily a 30% savings. Usually it's more than that. It's going to get better as we go forward. If you switch and go cloud, if you add up all the costs correctly. So it's actually more cost effective for a customer to deploy in the cloud over the long term for sure, if they measure all the costs. And then there are all the other benefits in terms of time to market, easier to provision new users, and the fact that now we can see how customers are using the applications. That's a huge change in the industry. So the way it used to work is you'd build an on-premise application, customer would buy it, they go hire a third party to customize and install it, some consultant. You're not actually sure what they're doing. 2 years later, they call you when things aren't working, and you're starting from scratch. Okay, what are you running? What version are you on? You're asking a lot of questions, trying to triage. What database are you using? It's just on and on and on. It just adds a lot of complexity to the system. So we actually tried to address that on-premise problem by building call home applications, embedding in our apps to call back and give us diagnostics. But this is much better. If we can see it day to day in the cloud, we can monitor usage. We can see which features are being used. We can ask customers why they aren't using certain features. We can make them better. And we have far fewer calls on configuration issues and how-to questions because the configuration issues are our problem. And so we think it's just a better way to use our applications, a better way to deploy them, and the customer satisfaction is much better when we're running it. So the third component of our cloud strategy was we decided that if you're going to move a cloud application and really take to heart the benefits that people anticipate of the cloud, you couldn't just move it as is. You had to change the way the application behaves and make it more consumable, more intuitive, and we call it beauty at work. We want to build beautiful applications. If you're taking the same processes and just moving them over, what you get is maybe an application that's cheaper to run, but it's not any faster to actually fully provision because the customers, the people who have to use the application, if they still need to go to class for 3 months to learn how to use the application, it's not really that fast. What you want is something intuitive, so if you provision it, you can actually start using it. And to do that, you have to change the way we thought of business applications. So typically, the user experience part of this was an afterthought for most business apps makers. They focus on the plumbing and focus on the vertical functionality, which we do as well, focus on the architecture, and the last thing that happened before it went out the door was sprucing up the UI a bit. It just wasn't a focus. The other reason it wasn't a focus is that the people who normally buy these applications and make decisions are usually executives, CFOs, CEOs. They aren't the people that use these applications, and so they never seen them. So we thought that's going to change. Part of our cloud architecture and strategy had to be making the application consumer from the end user. The next generation of users expect that. They grew up with iPhones and iPads, a different experience. And we needed to make this a core competence. And so it was one of the reasons that we moved to New York, which I'll explain in a moment. So you'll see ads in the airports talking about beauty at work. That's what we're talking about, making applications extremely consumer friendly. We use a term called consumer grade. In our industry, everybody used to talk about industrial grade application, making sure it was rigorous and scalable and secure. We actually think a lot of the innovation has been happening in the consumer world on consumer applications and social media type applications. So we're focused on that, borrowing those concepts and bringing them to business applications for responsive designs, making our applications easy to use, mobile form factor as well. And we didn't stop there. We're also making them social in the sense that most of our applications, you can do most of your work in a news feed if you prefer to do that instead of staring at a standard form. We try to get rid of forms out of our applications. So we have information come to you. All of our applications have been pre-wired for our social platform, which is called Mingle. And for most things, you can follow an object in the context of any application. So if you want to follow a customer and anything that happens to that customer shows up in your news feed or on your phone as an alert, you can do that. If you want to follow a purchase order, so anytime anybody touches that purchase order, you care about it, you can do that. And as you would expect, because we have everything wired to the same platform in the cloud, we can build timelines so you can see who did what in a workflow, who touched what when. All of this is a lot easier to do if the application is running in the cloud, pre-integrated, we can see everything, and we don't have all the boundary issues that you tend to have on premise. And as I mentioned, you can do work in the feed. For a lot of our customers, when they deploy in the cloud like this, they can also, on a mobile device, approve and reject things as they work without having to log into anything. And so we can just really experiment, see who's using what they're approving, how they're interacting, and optimize the workflows over time. So to do that, we actually have formed a separate company based here in New York called Hook and Loop, and we hired people with a special expertise in design, the people who understood beauty and user experience in a different way than enterprise applications companies typically did. And so you can see some of the types of people that we've been hiring. The first Apple iAd creator. We have the person who did the digital effects artist for the movie Avengers. And in fact, the second one about the Jonas here shortly. We have a Pulitzer Prize winner for information graphics, on and on and on. So the thought here was to find people who we call left-brain creatives, who are very creative, who came to New York to be in the fashion industry or some other advertising or some other creative aspect. And there's a lot of people like that in New York. But somewhere along the way, they picked up a bug for technology, picked up a few skill sets, and they want to express that creativity in application software. And so all the design schools, Fashion Institute, Technology, for instance, they all have technology tracks now, so which is perfect for us for being here. So this blend of technology and creativity and design, we're going to drive that and deploy that on a cloud platform. And so we're the only company doing this. We now have one of the largest creative agencies in all of New York with 80 people who do only this for user experience design. They spend a lot of time going out to watch how customers work, and because to really design a good user experience, you actually have to know what they're doing and what's important to them. And it changes the way you think about how to design applications. And so sometimes we start with the front end and watch what people are doing. Sometimes we assume after many releases of an application that everything on the screen is being used, and it's not. And you find out that the 40 things you put on the screen there are about 4 of them that actually get used every day. You couldn't see that before because it was running on premise, so you didn't know. Once you deploy in the cloud, you can actually see that, what people are using and how they're working. And so we think these things are related. We want people to be able to provision an application quickly, but also use it quickly. So this is a big competitive advantage for us. We're the only large applications company that has a separate creative agency. And from this, we're creating other concepts and services. So another service that came out of this whole line of thinking is we created a platform called Rhythm. And that is an engagement platform. So what we mean by that is for e-commerce or for patient engagement or for citizen engagement, we can build beautiful website engagement platforms for our customers but run those in the cloud and do the same thing so they can see how their customers are interacting. We can monitor that for them as well and help evolve it. So that rhythm service is essentially an e-commerce service or an engagement service that's working very well for us as well. So the impact of all that has been that we've been getting a lot of feedback from the analysts that this is different, that you're approaching cloud in a very different way than most other people are thinking about it. You're using it to transform the company, using it to measure how you build applications, how they're being used, and taking that feedback and redesigning the applications on a consistent basis, not just add a feature function, but let's figure out why people are using the applications or why not, what features that we should be changing and enhancing and get immediate feedback from customers to make them more engaging and beautiful. And so we think that's the direction of cloud in many areas, taking the entire industry, putting it in the cloud, but then learning from that as we go along. So if you add all that up and kind of summarize what we're doing, it is building those beautiful business applications with that last mile functionality for that industry and deploying that in the cloud. But that functionality by industry is key. You can't get there without that. Because if you don't have the functionality for the last mile functionality for the industry, you end up having to customize. They're going to hire a sensor or some other large consultant. And you don't get to multi-tenancy. You can't get to fast deployment with a lot of custom code from different consultants on the same platform. It just doesn't work. So you want standard functionality. So what we tell customers is don't customize our applications. We want to do that for you. So if you have something that is unique to your industry, well, we build things that are unique by industry. We add it to the Cloud Suite Healthcare, Cloud Suite Automotive. That's fine. Just tell us what it is. We'll make it standard. So we believe in mass customization, if that's a term. We'll take the customizations that would have been customizations in the past for your industry. They're now part of standard cloud service. And so the things that you were thinking about building, it's a good chance we've already built it for you. And that's what our experience has been. So you take a Piper Aircraft who was running an on-premise applications, had about 2,000 customizations. They moved to our Cloud Suite Industrial, and they dropped 2,100 customizations and running pretty much standard now. That's because we focus by industry, give them a cloud deployment platform, and really change the way they're using their applications. Much cheaper for them. They don't have to maintain those customizations. Much cheaper infrastructure as well. We can help them grow and deploy in different regions pretty quickly. If they want to go to China or somewhere else, that's no problem. They don't have to start the process all over again. We can just provision new users in a different location. So single sign-on wherever you are. We know what language you're using, and it just kind of happens. So those are the types of things we've been thinking about. It gives us enormous flexibility on how to deploy these applications. Also, customers are now kind of grown into this, and when we first started talking about this a few years ago, because of what we do, it's mission critical and sensitive data. We certainly had some discussions early on. Customers weren't quite comfortable with it 3 years ago. We've seen that change. Customers, even in aerospace and defense and government customers who told us they wouldn't do this 3 years ago, they've changed their mind. They're coming back down and said, you know, I'm a lot more comfortable with it. We've seen other organizations like us start to do it. I mean, the CIA is running in the government cloud now, so it's pretty secure. And we've been able to overcome the objections over the next few years. There's always a few holdouts who are still debating it, but they seem to be falling one by one by industry and by country. And the fact that now we can deploy it in many countries around the world, it's important to you to have data in a specific region. By not building our own data centers and leveraging Amazon's 45 points of presence around the world, we're able to make those decisions and get people comfortable by region as well. So we think we've kind of thought of all the objections and overcome them, whether it's you don't have the functionality for my industry. We do. You're not in the right locations. We are now. What are the benefits from a cost perspective? We can show that now. And so we think we're going to drive this industry cloud concept. We're the first ones to come up with it, and it's going to be a big part of our strategy going forward. We've seen enormous response. So once we first announced this, we announced something called Upgrade X, which was saying to all of our on-premise customers, we will take your existing data from your existing on-premise app. We'll move it to the latest version of latest version of our app. We'll convert that data over for $55,000. And no customizations, you can get going. And so we announced that to our entire customer base, and literally within weeks, we had about 500 customers raising their hand and said, I want to do this, and we're working our way through that now. And more since then are starting to ask for the same. So that was a key part of this. You had to do all that work and then make it compelling from a cost perspective to move. We had to build all the tools, of course, to take your on-premise data, and depending on what you're running, we built those tools to be able to migrate them to the cloud. And we're in the process of doing that now. So that's how we have the 2,000 customers, and it's growing by the week, and it's been a pretty fun journey. But it is, I think, a textbook case on how, when you have a company you're trying to transform and change, you can use cloud as kind of the rallying cry and build around that and converge on that for your next generation strategy. And it's basically redefined Infor as people once knew it. So that's what we're doing. We're certainly having a good time and excited about it. Thanks a lot for coming. Appreciate it.